Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the SKNIS Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards. Welcome to InFocus, a weekly program where we zoom in on what's happening within and throughout the government, your government. Education is widely considered as the key to unlocking individual success. It is one of the main priorities for the government as it seeks to promote knowledge and skill development, drive innovation, and transform the economy of St. Kitts and Nevis in pursuit of us becoming a sustainable island state. The Honorable Dr. Geoffrey Hanley, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister responsible for education, is with us today to share his plans and the government's agenda for educational enhancement. Dr. Hanley is also joined by his Permanent Secretary, Lisa Pistana. Stay with us as we delve into your government, your business. Thanks for staying with us, and allow me now to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Geoffrey Hanley, and Mrs. Pistana, Permanent Secretary to InFocus. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
It certainly is a pleasure. Deputy, we want to start with you. Now, of course, you've been in government for several decades. You often boast that, many persons would have passed through your hands. And during your different roles, you were reporting to senior government officials and various ministers of government along the way. How has your years of public service prepared you to lead as not just the Minister of Education today, but the Deputy Prime Minister, which is the second highest elected office in the land?
Thank you very much, Ian. I served for 28 years, just before I retired, and I was given the opportunity, starting off my career as a teacher, and eventually I went to start the youth department for the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, and just prior to retirement again, I returned to education and I serve as a principal. Being a civil servant and having the opportunity of serving in those areas, that is what I would say prepared me for the journey that I took and where I am right now, because the foundation was laid. I had the opportunity to lead in many capacities as coordinator and director and principal. Being able to interact with persons and various personalities, dealing with conflict resolution, and of course always lending that listening ear to someone who might be going through some difficult period in their lives. And I was always looked upon to give advice. And I think being able to serve, as I said, in those areas, they have prepared me for the position that I am in today. Of course, with the Almighty God. And I must say to you, reflecting on the journey, my grade 3 teacher, Mrs. Rogers, that's the former owner of Singers, reminded me after my ascension of a story that happened in grade 3, where she left me in charge of the classroom. And when she came back, she said, just as how controlled, right there and then she knew that somewhere down the line I would have become some sort of leader. This I did not really pick up while I was in primary school, but she told me after my ascension.
And so, as a former educator, you bring a unique perspective to the leadership of the Ministry of Education. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, Ian, as you know, and I think the country knows by now, that I have a great and strong passion for education, because I think education must be holistic, it must be relevant, and at the same time, it must be fun. And I have joined a team that I must say was a very strong team, including our heads of departments and our permanent secretary and assistant secretaries. And I am hoping with the energy that I have and the challenge that I was given by the teachers last year to deliver the New Deal, that I would be able to do such as I ensure that we continue to make sure that it is holistic, relevant, and some aspect of fun with a lot of new incentives.
Mrs. Pistana, of course you have the benefit of being an educator as well too. Tell us a bit about some of the insights that you bring to the job, that you're able to transform now that you're in leadership within the ministry.
Well, good afternoon to you, to Ian, and to your listening audience, and thank you so much for having me here on InFocus. It's my first time on InFocus. I find myself to be extremely privileged to be in this particular position. Like Minister Hanley, I started off as a teacher, and then I became a principal, and onto an education officer, and then Deputy Chief Education Officer, and now I'm here as a permanent secretary. I believe that those roles aptly shaped me to sit in this seat and perform at this particular level. One of the major things when we look at education as an accounting officer, which is what a permanent secretary is, funding is critical. Allocating funds where they are most needed. So we are in charge of shaping the society, and not the society for today or just tomorrow, but within the future, 10 years out. So we have to begin to look at what is relevant, what is important, what are some of the skill sets that we need to infuse our students with, so that they are active and contributing members of the society within the next 10, 15, 20 years. So that is a part of my charge. I would agree with the Minister in saying that education must be relevant. It must be relevant. So we have to be forward thinking. We have to be ahead of the curve. We can't think today just for tomorrow. We also have to equip our teachers and our spaces with the necessary tools to achieve this goal. And that is one of the driving forces for me sitting in this seat. So we've been looking over the last year at what it is our schools have, what they don't have, what we within our role need to do more of. So when we're talking about our buildings, the maintenance of the buildings, the equipment, the human resource capacity, the training of our teachers, and not just teachers, but the ancillary staff, because education is wider than just teachers. You know, everybody contributes to the success of these particular individuals. So it's extremely critical for us to make sure that we appropriate the necessary funds so that our students, our teachers, and on a whole, education can be successful and reach the heights where we want it to reach.
Deputy Prime Minister, you've been in office for just over a year now. Tell us what were the top 3 things that you wanted to accomplish? Of course, those who are looking at us online and also on ZIZ TV would have seen a graphic where there were some key achievements of the ministry that were outlined. But specifically, I want to hear what your priorities were and how you were able to achieve them.
Well, Ian, every aspect of education for me is a priority, but I will share what my team was able to get done in a short time, because there are some low-hanging fruits that I went after very, very early, and you would have heard of the announcement of the free tuition at the Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College, which was a great impact on our parents in terms of the saving financially. Of course, another area that I went after was early childhood, because there were a number of complaints prior to me getting there, and we immediately outfitted them with the resource teachers that they needed, and was able to provide a traveling allowance for those teachers. Of course, in recent time, you heard of the reduction in the interest rate, student loan interest from 9 to 5.
That's at the Development Bank.
At the Development Bank. This is a tremendous accomplishment, and of course, we would have frozen, or we will be freezing the interest while you are studying, because I remember many persons would have been struggling while their children are overseas in the university. They are trying to pay their interest, and it became a burden, and our government thought it was best for us to assist in that area, and I am happy that we were able to deliver. I must share with you, Ian, a story, because sometimes you do these things and although you have an idea of the impact, unless you get real stories, that is another level of appreciation. And this young lady walked up to me. I remembered her face, but was trying to make the connection without giving the impression that, I didn't really know her.
Right.
And she was like, Mr. Hanley, with tears in her eyes, I just came to thank you. I just came back from the US to visit my mom, and I just want to thank you and the government for reducing the interest rate for her student loan, because I have no idea of how she was struggling, and this has made and I am telling you, she was literally crying, and she made something that was even touching to me, even though I wasn't thinking of it. She said, before I go back, I am going to become a registered voter, and I will return to vote for you. So those are some of the areas that we touched, as I said, low-hanging fruits, and I was happy in quick time for us to be able to deliver on a promise that I made while I was campaigning, is that in our large schools, we are going to put a second deputy in place, and we were able to accomplish that for Dr. William Connor, Tucker Clark, Washington Archibald High School, Bastia High, Charles, no.
Just the two major high schools.
The two major high schools. And we are even going to take it a bit further in those larger schools this year. Our deputies would be non-teaching deputies.
What is the purpose of having a second deputy in school?
Well, I know you have never had the opportunity of teaching or being an administrator in the school, but a lot of work happens in our schools, and the deputy have a role to play when the principal is not there, and even while the principal is there, they have their role to play. And they have all of their classes to cover. And we thought that once we have a second deputy, it would free up one to be able to assist in more administrative work, being able to assist with additional training and support of our teachers. So the deputy would be able to go and sit in and assess teachers. By doing that, the school will become a better and a stronger school. So that was one of the areas. I don't know, the PS I would imagine would have other things, because she served, as she said, as an education officer, and she roamed the entire country, including going over to Nevis as well.
So Mrs. Pistana, you probably can jump in here.
Yeah, thank you so much. So when we're looking at our 5 major primary schools within the Federation, our deputies are teaching deputies, and that means that they have a class, plus they have to do some instructional support. That becomes extremely challenging. And I know many persons think, well, a principal just has to walk around and whatnot. The managerial aspect of principalship involves the desk work, it also involves the observation and the instructional leadership aspect of it. And so to balance those two often becomes difficult within large institutions, and not just large only because of the student population size, but we're also looking at the number of adults that that person would have to whether observe or manage, because we have ancillary staff along with teachers. So within our 5 large primary schools, the deputies are now becoming non-teaching deputies. So their focus will be on instructional support and lending whatever assistance might need to be lent to principals, especially when they're not on the campus. So if they're in a meeting, that person takes over and helps to run the school. In our 2 large high schools, Bastia High School and Washington Archibald High School, the ratio of principal or administrator to teacher is 1 to 80. So let's think about that. 1 principal to 80, and then you add a deputy, so it comes down to 2 to 40. Well, if we're looking at best practices, it's no way you can do your desk work, do all the observations you need to do, lend assistance in terms of instructional support, and do it successfully. So hence why we needed to add a 2nd deputy at our major high schools, right? So I know, all of us went to school, and all of us had experiences with administrators, and so we might feel that this is not necessarily based on our own experiences, but education today is completely different. It's extremely dynamic. The desires of us as a ministry, what we need in terms of reporting has increased, because we're not only serving our local population, but we are interacting with the region and internationally. So we are called to be accountable for what it is we do in the country, especially with some of the partnership funds that we have secured, right? So hence why we decided to add on the 2nd deputy at our major high schools. And it is not something that's going to stop there, as Minister said. We have the formula, so we're going to look to see what are the other needs within our other schools. And it might not just be because of the size of the teaching staff, but sometimes, they might be in an at-risk area. And therefore, you need a lot more monitoring or assistance with monitoring in that particular school. So for us, we're looking at how do we create inclusive, safe environments that help to foster learning. And we're not only looking at our students, but our employees must feel that they are appreciated as well. People tell us, oh, well, teachers have a long summer. If we were to talk to teachers, they'll tell you they barely have a summer. Because you have to wrap up at the end of the school year, and sometimes that takes you into July, and then you might have a bit of time off, and then you have to begin preparing for the new year, right? And so we have to look at how we can create nurturing environments for both the adults and the students. And that is something that is a priority for us, not just for this year, but going forward. It's a real priority for us. Sorry, go ahead.
Deputy, I just want to go back a bit now in terms of the 3 priorities, the first 3 things that you outlined that you were ready to tackle in the ministry. You described them as low-hanging fruits, but that doesn't mean that they were easy to accomplish.
No, not at all. Because for sure the tuition free at CFBC, that was financially a large sum, but low-hanging in the sense that we have a government with a minister that believe that what is best for our children, we need to make the investment. Because once you make the investment in education, that will assist in all other aspects. We will then eventually spend less in social services because persons will not be depending on. So the investment in education is worthwhile. Although education is not a ministry that brings in millions for the government, we as a government, we will be investing in education, or continue to invest in education.
And of course, studies have shown that the more educated the population, then of course the less crime rate that there is, certainly. Okay.
Most definitely.
Mrs. Pistana, let me come back to you now in terms of the reference where you spoke about, having the staff of the different schools, you know, properly equipped. Let's talk a bit about the teaching staff now. That certainly is something, because they have direct interaction with our children 8 hours per day, sometimes even more, depending on...
Longer than 8.
Right. Okay. So tell us a bit about, I understand that there was, of course, a pre-service training that took place where I think it was 75 teachers were welcomed into the ministry. They're being prepared, prospective teachers, that is.
I'm just going to stop you there.
Right.
Prospective teachers. So therefore, we have a pre-service program. As you know, within our country, persons can teach without being teacher trained, and that is something, when we talk about professionalizing the teaching force, it's going to change over time. You must come trained before you begin to temple, if you want me to put it that way, or before you begin to teach. But this year, we had 75 persons who indicated a desire to become teachers and to join the education fraternity. 75 persons were interviewed. Now we're at a point where we're doing staffing. So it does not mean the 75 persons will be taken on board. I don't want to dissuade anyone who might have interviewed and gone through the 2-week process. It's just that we have to make sure that the teachers who are coming out of CFBC, who are teacher trained, they have to be placed. And then from there, we have persons who will be going off to study. Those persons, for whatever reason, might want to leave the education fraternity and go on to do something else. Then we have to make the necessary placements for those individuals. So it is a process. It's an arduous process. It's a sensitive process, and it's a time. It takes time to complete the process. So for us, even though if somebody isn't hired in the first go around, so for September, we often bring them in to sub. If you have somebody on maternity leave, if somebody is on extended sick leave, things of that nature. We also touch that pool for teaching assistants, because we believe, you know, these persons coming in, they're very skilled in terms of the subjects that they would have taken so far. They have the soft skills that we're looking for once they successfully made it through the interview process. These are the things that we've identified and that we like about them. And so we can utilize them within the teaching fraternity, but they might not be a teacher as yet.
Are these prospective teachers coming in with a mindset to serve? Do they understand their importance in the role of nation building?
Well, I can't tell you what's in anybody's mind. I can't tell you that. But I can say this: nobody comes to teaching just because teaching is a difficult job. I know, as I said before, people think because they went to school, they can teach, and people often don't have the level of respect for teachers that they need to have. But if someone says that they want to end up in the teaching fraternity or enter into the teaching fraternity, then it's something that they have a desire to do. They really want to make an impact on the society. They really want to improve the health and well-being of the society in which they live, and that is why they come into the fraternity. So, to answer your question, I believe that this group of individuals come with that mindset already. Now, for us as education officials, we have to continue to nurture it. Because as you know, you might come in all starry-eyed and you think things are a particular way, and then you bounce upon a student who might just throw you off kilter, you know, and you become a little bit despondent. But we are, you know, we do that. We have an in-service program that helps our new teachers through the initial stages of teaching.
Mrs. Pistana, Deputy Prime Minister, stand by. We're going to take a quick break and we'll continue our discussion. We'll talk a bit about the Bastia High School coming up next. Stay with us. We'll be back with more In Focus. Welcome back to In Focus. We continue our discussion with the Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Geoffrey Hanley, and Mrs. Pistana. Of course, they are within the Ministry of Education. Deputy, the Bastia High School, where does that stand?
Well, my good brother, Ian, as you would recall, almost some 11 years, and probably counting, the original Bastia High School had to be relocated in temporary buildings because of what would have transpired. After assuming the position of Minister of Education, of course, not because that's my school, the birthplace of champions, I thought it was necessary to start working immediately to ensure that we are able to rebuild or build a brand new Bastia High School on the original site. And we have set out to do that. We started the demolition of the buildings in terms of the roofs, and we were able to assist quite a number of small businesses, or roofers as we would put it, who were able to remove the campus's roof. Now is the actual demolition of the wall structure. Some 18, I think, and the PS can correct me if I'm off, would have tendered their bid to be able to service the government in that area in getting the buildings down. That process is over, and the results are with the procurement board in terms of the recommended winner of the bid.
Right, and you mentioned that there were some 18 companies, and of course the bids, the deadline for the bids, they were closed in June. They were opened by the procurement officer, who is the Director of Public Works, George Gilbert, in a very open and transparent process. Everyone was brought into the rooms and the bids were open and read out so that everyone can see what the proposal was in terms of the time frame and the cost, which of course is very important. But in terms of generating work for the local population now, of course the government is keen on ensuring that, as you would refer to earlier, when the roofs are being removed, that local companies are the ones who benefit from this type of activity.
Yes, and it was strategic as well, because we needed to make sure that we touch as many hats as possible. And likewise, whoever ends up winning the bid, one might be able to do the eastern campus, and another company might win the bid to do the western campus. I also believe, because of what we are thinking, many other small businesses would be able to benefit, because the time frame in which the buildings would have to be demolished, the companies might not necessarily have all of the resources available to them at the time. Because if you're a company and you might only have, let's say, 1 or 2 trucks, and you need to get this building down and out in a week, you might have to get assistance from another contractor. So many families and many persons would benefit from the initiative.
And of course, subcontracting other companies to assist with projects is nothing new. It is something that is done regularly here in St. Kitts and Nevis and around the world as well too. All right, so we move from, in terms of the Bastia High School, now into the Irish Town Primary School. Of course, there were some challenges there, at a security-related standpoint, but also in terms of the physical infrastructure itself. Can you provide an update? And of course, Ms. Pistana, you can jump in here as well too.
Well, the nation would remember the tragic death of one of our security officers on the Irish Town Primary School campus. Happened to be a cousin of mine. And as a result, we had to relocate our students, and we decided that we will do some work on that school. Some of the work should have already been done over these many years, but might have been neglected for whatever reasons. And the Ministry of Education was very proactive in ensuring that this is an opportunity for us to present what another safe school can look like. And we set out to do that with a number of stakeholders. But I think I'll prefer for my permanent secretary, who was really the day-to-day person dealing with the project, to share some information with you and the general public. So, PS.
All right, thank you, Minister. I just want to say a huge thank you to our parents, our teachers, ancillary staff, and our students for bearing with us. This has been a challenging experience for them, but they've worked with us to ensure that their students remain at a point where they are learning, and learning is going on at a high level, even though they weren't in their regular space. Also, a huge thank you to the corporate partners who came on board, helped to fund some of the renovations that we did. We have the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, the St. Kitts Nevis Anguilla National Bank. We also have St. Kitts Masonry Products paving, correct. We also have Garden Hotspurs, their community group, and all of the neighbors who came out to help with the cleaning of the school and the disposal of some of the items that needed to be disposed of at the institution. So, as Minister said, we had a very tragic event happen at the school, but out of tragedy, I think, comes positiveness. And so we banded together, we identified as a ministry the areas that needed immediate work. One of them was the enclosures at the very front of the building, so we put in enclosures so that persons just can't walk right onto the compound, because we have our children playing in that particular area from time to time. We also relocated the principal's office. Before, you would have to walk all the way into the school to almost the back of the school to get to the principal's office. So that is one of the first spaces that you meet. So we relocated it, refurbished the space, and we're just doing the final little touches to it now. There were some roofing issues. We are addressing that this week. The top level of the school, the classrooms at the top level had some sagging floors, so we've braced those floors. The contractor has completed it, tidied up this space. We have left the perimeter walls to go in, well fenced, because it's going to be, we have one wall that's already in. We did the retaining, a retaining wall in the top section, because that we were experiencing soil erosion, and it was sort of not undermining the building, but the soil from there was being washed away, so we had to put in a retaining wall, backfill, and now that is completed. We also added additional security systems so as to make sure that our students and our teachers and whatnot remain safe while they are on the campus. So those are just a few of the things that we would have accomplished. And like I said, we have one or two things to complete, but they're going to be completed before school starts, and we're going to open up in spot September 4th. What I will say to the neighboring public, the same way you came out to help us clean out certain areas, we're going to look for you again to set out the classrooms to help us wipe off the desks, sweep the floors, put the desks back in order, so that, when the students and teachers come back, they have a space that's ready for learning. So we will call upon you again, so we ask you to get yourselves ready.
So I just wanted to emphasize that point that you made. The school will be reopened on September 4th when the new school term begins.
Of course, of course.
And what's your message for the public, those who, the parents in particular, who have their children participating in that school, attending that school, especially for those who, maybe new? What's your message to the parents?
Well, like I said before, I want to thank those parents who've been at this school throughout this experience. Thank them so much for their cooperation, for understanding, for working with us. For those of you who are joining us new to the Irishtown Primary School, I say welcome. It's a wonderful school. We have a lot in store for this institution come September. I think the minister has made no secret it's going to become the School of Linguistics. We have a large Spanish-speaking community within the Irishtown area, and we feel that those persons need to be properly serviced. And outside of that, we need to make sure that we are, as I've said before, forward-thinking. We are a tourism-based, or have a tourism-based industry. We're service-oriented, where persons are coming in from many different countries, and therefore our natives must have an opportunity to vie for some of those jobs that will be created because of that, and hence they must have an appreciation for modern languages. And so that is something that we are in space and ready to do come September, so we'll be working.
So what languages in particular are you referring to?
Well, as I said, it is a large Spanish-speaking population. So therefore, we know readily on campus you have Spanish speakers. But we're looking at other languages like French and like Mandarin. So those are some of the other areas. Now, everything isn't going to start at once. I don't want the public to think, come September, you're going to hear Mandarin being taught at the school. We are hoping that we can start with French, simply because it's something that we've piloted before and we know that it works, and we have individuals who have the necessary experience. We just recently hired a curriculum officer for the modern languages, and that person is gamed to help us to build out our vision for the Irish Town Primary School. You
said French. Did you mean Spanish? That they're going to start with Spanish or French?
I said French, but it doesn't mean that we're going to stop there alone. And I have a particular reason why I said it. But at the end of the day, when you come, you'll see what it is. We're hoping that the signage can be in both languages, you know, both, well, the three, Spanish, French, and English, so that those persons who might be Spanish speaking, they can read the signs. Even if you're English speaking, you get to learn another language by realizing, okay, if this is bathroom and this the word for bathroom in Spanish is, I don't know Spanish, so you know whatever it is. Or if you go to the numbers and numbering on the classrooms, you know, so it's a way for our students to become exposed, right? And that is all we're looking at. We're trying to give our students an opportunity for growth, an opportunity so that they can see other things. So when they get to high school and they have to choose a modern language, they don't shy away from it. They don't feel as if they can't do it. They've already had the exposure, they have the confidence, and they willingly choose a modern language, because those are some of the areas in the high school where we have some of the smallest numbers when it's time for them to write it at the CSEC level. And
advantageous, of course, young persons, they often spend a lot of time watching YouTube or programming on television, and some of it is in Spanish. I could think of, and she may be a bit outdated for this generation now, but like Dora the Explorer, there are Spanish language integrated into the programming as well. So our children, of course, won't be alien for them to hear Spanish. And of course, they hear it in the community as well. Deputy, quickly, let's move to the Cotton Thomas School, comprehensive school now.
Yeah, the Cotton Thomas Comprehensive School, when it was built to accommodate 50 students. It now has on its roll 152, just about, and 2 shifts. So there are students who are attending the Cotton Thomas Comprehensive School in the morning, and another shift come in the afternoon. That is a concern, and we were able to work towards making some changes to that. In September, I'm also looking forward to the new uniform for the Edgar T. Morris, because as you know, we merged Estridge Primary and Edgar T. Morris together. So that's a new school that we are starting in September. Uniform, crest, everything. Doing that, it has allowed us to utilize the Estridge Primary School. And we decided that we will make it the second campus for the Cotton Thomas Comprehensive School. Going forward, it will not only be the second campus, but it will become the main campus for the Cotton Thomas Comprehensive School, because of a 40-year anniversary gift that we asked from the people, the Republic of China, Taiwan. And they have graciously agreed that they would deliver a brand new school to us, which will be 2-in-1, because autism is on the rise in not only St. Kitts but the region. But bringing it home, I think we have just over 190 something persons who might have been diagnosed or might be
on the spectrum.
On the spectrum.
Right.
The person, Dr. Claxton and her team at the industrial site, they are doing an amazing job with working along with those children with the resources that they have.
But the space is limited.
The space is extremely inappropriate for the numbers, but design the program in such a way that they can cater. What we are going to do over on the Estridge side, we are going to build our Spectrum Center right there. So it'll be 2 campuses, separate, but in one. Both will be able to utilize the resources that will be there, because the PSNI, we were able to have and the team from Cotton Thomas and the Spectrum to have an idea of what their new school, their new dream can look like. And both will be able to share in the therapy room, the pools, and the different training rooms or spaces that they would have there.
And of course, the upgrades and services that are being provided to persons who are differently abled is in keeping within the government's vision. Of course, we mentioned that you're the Minister of Education, but you're also responsible for disabilities. A new ministry was created with focus on disabilities, and so it is in keeping with that general sense that the government is moving forward.
And this is something that even as a ministry, we hold very dear to us in education, because it's all inclusive. And as you rightly said, I'm also the Minister for Aging and Disabilities. And even on our summer camp, as we celebrated 40 years of summer camp, this summer, we had students on our camp for the very first time who had some form of disability. We had our wheelchair ramps and everything put in place. And I must say, the winner of our summer camp talent show, the male, visually impaired, and he won the talent show hands down. So we are very serious about what we set out as it relates to persons living with disabilities.
Let's move now, Deputy, with reference to financial incentives that the government is providing. Now, we know that the government announced temporary concessions on the importation of school supplies. The period that was outlined was July 10th to September 30th. And there's also VAT-reduced days that are coming. It's slated for August 25 and 26. Now, the Cabinet Secretary also, yesterday, persons are watching this is on Wednesday, but on Tuesday, when the Cabinet briefing was done, announced that there was, during the post-Cabinet briefing, that there would be enhanced financial support for public and private nurseries, daycares, and preschools, and also a back-to-school voucher initiative. Explain to us the strategy behind all of these concessions, because the government essentially is forfeiting income. What is the strategy behind this?
Well, it is basically, Ian, a government that cares for the people. We recognize that there are some struggles still, or challenges, as it relates to ready cash in families, because persons have not yet bounced back from the pandemic, the COVID. And as a caring government, it is our responsibility to try to make sure that, as one of my colleagues would say, ease the squeeze. So this is yet another initiative that we have brought on board. Prior to us coming to government, we had 1 VAT day. Now we have introduced 3 VAT days during the year, or 3 VAT periods during the year. This year, as you indicated, we have given the opportunity for persons to get a little financial assistance as the VAT days are coming up, duty-free on school supplies. And as another initiative coming out of the Cabinet briefing, we are taking it another step further, because we recognize that there are a lot of single mothers who need some additional support. Many of them are trying their best, and we must commend them. And the government thought this was an opportunity again, as a bounce back from the pandemic to try to see how best we can assist in our daycares, our nurseries, because a lot of the private ones in particular suffered greatly after the pandemic. And we recognize that a lot of the times students go to these private, 'cause in public we are free, and sometimes the parents really don't have the money to pay the provider. And sometimes the provider would continue to take the child. But parents, after a while, sometimes fake sickness, because, you know, they don't have the money, so they will say the child is sick this week because, you know. And as a government, we are saying that children should not stay at home because the parent might be experiencing some difficulties. And we are going to work with the private providers to see how best we will be able to assist them while we are assisting our parents, or if I want to zero in, our single parents.
Pierce, is there any insight that you'd care to add? Of course, as an educator, you had, and a curriculum development officer, you had direct contact with persons, with parents and guardians, of course, who, you know, they have to provide for their children and fund their education.
Well, I agree with the minister. I mean, COVID-19, the pandemic really hit the majority of our society, not just our society, but the region and internationally for like, you know, economically, it devastated some people's savings. It put their income down to zero. Our parents, I think, were hardest hit because they had to provide for themselves and another mouth, whether 2, 3, or 4, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we speak to the issue of having public and private daycares to provide for those within the early childhood level, we only have 15 public centers, but we have 72 private centers. So I want you to think about the math there. And most of the private centers, they are persons who are just breaking even. They're not doing this for profit. So if you were just breaking even before COVID and COVID hit, you know, you're decimated. Okay, and they've had to try and recover as best as they can. The minister is correct in saying many of them took children even though the parents could not afford to pay. Because if they didn't take the child, then the parent couldn't go to work to provide whatever little for them within the household. So they really sacrificed even more. So we see these economic relief measures as important and critical to help to bolster the private sector of the early childhood division in particular. When you go into your primary and secondary schools, it's quite similar, but except that we have many more public primary and secondary schools than we do have private. So if you're experiencing a problem in paying your school fees, you can easily shift over to the public institution and we will take them. No matter what time of the year, we're going to take them. Okay, and so the relief is spread across those from 0 right up to the age of 17, and it is a necessary measure so that people can get back on their feet again. We know that some parents might have shopped already and might have bought, you know, school supplies already. But if you know anything about education, it's dynamic. Mm-hmm. And so there's always a project. And projects require funding materials and whatnot, and you can't go into, I don't want to call them Bottici and Harper's and say, you know, credit me the Manila or the whatever. So they're always in constant need. And can you imagine a parent when a child comes to ask for this material for a project, how a parent might feel if they can't provide it? And every parent wants to be, we're both parents, we want to be the best parents that we can be, and that means providing for our children. And I think this is one way of helping parents, especially single parents, to add to their financial little pocket there so that they can further help their children.
Let's move to the new school term. Of course, as we established before, September 4th is when it's set to begin. What changes are we likely to see? Let's start with one that has been discussed in many quarters for many years, actually, and that would be hairstyles.
Should the minister handle that one?
Well, I will start, Ian, and then, of course, the PS will come in. But as you mentioned, the here guidelines will be different come September 4th. And I want to thank Deputy Education Officer, Mr. Roger Woodley, and his entire committee for the work that they started and that they will continue to do. I had the opportunity of meeting with them, and the plans that they had or they have is extremely comprehensive and one that the country will appreciate. Of course, I have made many announcements prior to recent that the here policy must be looked at, because government would have had quite a number of litigations where persons end up winning, and we thought that being part of the dynamic education presenting a new deal that we are doing, that this is something that we must do. And as such, we set out to do that. And I must say, Ian, that I had the opportunity on many occasions to interact with our students whenever I visited the school or had an engagement with them. Some would approach me first to ask me, when are you going to change, the hair policy, or when you're going to allow us to wear braids? And I would then engage and say, if that was to happen, what would your expectation be? And they gave you the idea of the length. None of them ever said to me, it should pass their shoulder. They always say it should be, shoulder length. No color. And they told you that I went as far as to ask, as a teacher now, what do you think will happen or should happen if students try to violate the new policy? They say, well, if you don't want to give them another chance, you allow them to revert right back to what was there before. So that is one of the changes that we will see coming in September. Of course, we have to make sure that all of the different stakeholders, by now they should have been notified in terms of what, and it's a work in progress, because part of the plan that I saw from the committee is that after a few weeks of implementation, they are going to go back to the students in terms of a questionnaire, and of course the teachers as well, in terms of finding out if it is in fact working. Are there any other changes that we need to make, or we might have made a change? Do we need to stop it right away because we realize we said maybe only two strikes or parts or design, and you realize somebody came to school with a Spider-Man. So I like the flexibility of it. Most of the time, Ian, the children are never the problem. The parents end up being the ones on many occasions who try to put the students in that position. So we're going to be making in our PTAs and our public announcements a plea to the parents. Whatever the changes are, we need you to make sure that you have your child or children conform to that. If we say shoulder, no need for you to make it longer than shoulder and try to do a design in it to make it look shorter. And I'm excited just like how the children are excited. And finally, sometimes these announcements, you don't know the impact on them. I was a lineman one day, and a young man recognized that I was the Minister of Education here. He didn't know. at the time because of position, after his mom said yes. And he wanted to come to say something to me, but I recognized that he was a bit shy. And I approached him, introduced myself. I am Geoffrey, Hanley.
Around what age?
He's about 14 or 15. And I said, what's your question? And I guess in hesitation, you know, I knew what he wanted to ask. And I said, you're trying to find out if you would be able to go to school with your hair like that? And he said yes. And I said, yes, you would be. And right there and then he said, I really want to thank you and thank all who is responsible for doing that, because really and truly your hair has nothing to do with learning. So that's one of the major changes that you'll see in September.
Real stories that impact real people.
Yes.
And we're almost out of time, Deputy, so quickly let's talk a bit about the one-to-one laptop program.
Well, the one-to-one laptop, that is going to be rolled out in September as promised. All 8,000 devices are here, and we are putting in necessary network, or the most, if not all, already PS back me up, are in place. And why I said not all, because I know one aspect of it is to make sure that we have the proper connectivity. And that is a project that is ongoing in terms of the fiber optics, the cables that are being laid, and we are going to have them all laid at our high schools. So we are getting ready to start with the distribution. But I will ask my permanent secretary to share some more exciting insight, because we are not just giving the students a laptop.
Yes, and unfortunately we have 2 minutes, so very quickly.
Okay, so like the minister said, we will be handing out devices in September. A device without something on it is just like a book with just pages, and that's it. So we're going to be placing on a learning management system. Parents, teachers, students will be able to track their students' progress during time. The books that are on the laptops will be interactive. They can take their assessments, so no need for pen and paper. If you're taking an assessment now, you can actually use your laptop or your tablet, and you can take an assessment on it. And for the ease of the teachers, it can be graded if it's multiple choice on the actual device. So those are some of the things that are coming out. We're going to be doing some training, so it is going to be rolled out slowly. When I say slowly, meaning different forms, different groupings. So 3rd through 5th form will be the first set that will be getting their laptops. We're going to have the adequate training for the teachers, for the students, and for parents. So we're going to be touching all groups, all of the stakeholders. So it's going to be an exciting time. What I will say though, parents, you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility. You must take care of the device. And you must, and we go back to the HERE policy, rules are set for a reason. We expect the parents to model and to guide their children accordingly.
And if I may, Ian, back to the laptops, teachers would also be able to get lesson plans from the program that we are going to be offering. Of course, it's going to be an ongoing built-in as we move forward. So that's another thing I would have been able to deliver on.
Okay, and so will that be the only or the major focus in terms of technological advancements in the classroom? Because, of course, with the different schools that are being built, Bassey High School, Cotton Thomas, well, the extended part of it, the new campus.
Technology going to be the major driving force in education. And I've said already, and I repeat it, the AVEC building, which would eventually be changed, our National Training Institute, NTI, one of the classrooms up there, that is going to be outfitted as our technological classroom, our smart classroom, because we are in constant contact with universities who are ready to deliver programs, bachelor's degree program for our teachers who don't want to travel. And I've given them the assurance that we're going to have that smart classroom so that they'll be at AVEC, but they'll be in University of the Virgin Islands, or Southern University in Louisiana, or Florida Memorial College in University in Miami. So that will happen. And in our, of course, the Basse High School will be state of the art. And as we go along, we are going to be developing our labs, our computer labs, in all of our schools. And we are encouraging our teachers to use the devices at their advantage. Allow the children to use them for their lessons.
Deputy Prime Minister, Mrs. Pistana, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of InFocus. Certainly there is a lot more that we can talk about. And of course, you know, I remember hosting conversations last week where we did focus on universal education, the Clarence Fitzroy Brent College, and the issue of AI came in. Certainly something that we can discuss at the next time when you join us. So for now, I'd like to thank you for being with us today.
You're welcome.
And it's my pleasure being here. You did say the hour going to fly by, and I couldn't believe it, but it's a pleasure as always. You being one of my product, interacting with you.
It's unfortunate we don't have another hour. I'd like to invite you quickly, just before we leave, to join us for conversations. Of course, it is on Thursdays at 6 p.m. We'll be at Nevis, so you can tune in, of course, online, and there are various formats. You can check the St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service page where you can find out where you can tune in. The topic will be constitutional reform. For now, we'd like to thank you for joining us for this edition of InFocus. I'm Ian Richards.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.